Good morning to you all. You're very much welcome to this day's show, and I am glad to be hosting it again. From last week, I believe that you have all been well. The city and the country is gripped in fear, and that is because on the 16th of November, which was a day after last week's show, we had double bomb blasts in the city, and we lost people. And from the show to the families that lost loved ones, our hearts are with you and our condolences upon the loss of your loved ones. We also had a couple of people injured. A number of them were released from hospital, but we know that there are some who are still in hospital. And so for everyone who was injured, and we pray for a quick recovery from the show to you. Today's show is dedicated to a category of people that we probably did not recognize or whose injuries we did not see as a result of the bomb blast. As you're all aware, November has become an almost dark month in Uganda. Last year we had the November riots, and to date we're still waiting for reports, we're still waiting for justice to be served. And this year, when we thought we're only going to be celebrating or remembering those riots because it's been a year, we had the double bomb blasts. And so November has 2 years in a row just become a dark month for this country. And yet, in all this darkness, there is the conversation around trauma that we don't talk about, and not just physical trauma. There is the emotional trauma. And so today we're going to have a conversation around the injuries that we do not talk about, the injuries that don't include blood, that don't include you being admitted in hospital, that don't include people dying, and yet that's an equally important conversation for us to have as a country. And so joining me on the show today is Miss Grace Obalim. She's not a stranger to the show. Grace works with TPO Uganda, and she's a clinical psychologist. She's a mental health advocate and practitioner. So Grace, you're very much welcome to the show. Also joining me today is Juliet Mureithi, who is the managing director of the Africa Retreat Center Counseling, and she's a psychologist and an addiction professional. So Juliet, you're very much welcome to the show as well. And the last person that is joining us on the show today is Barbara.M.Kalumba. She is having trouble joining, but once she comes in, that will be Barbara.M.Kalumba, who is a counseling psychologist, and she's also the vice president of the Uganda Counseling Association. And so we're going to start this conversation from a pre-discussion that we had as people on the panel about the ease with which, Barbara has joined us, yes, the ease with which a lot of Ugandans moved on, from the 16th. But also, what does that mean? Is that to say that there wasn't trauma that happened? Is that a response to how we deal with things, to how we are socialized? And why is it important that we discuss trauma within the context of the bombings on the 16th of November? And I'll invite Grace to lead us through that conversation. So Grace, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Isabella. And it's good to be back on the Women's Show again. It's always amazing to all such discussion. Like Isabella said, my name is Grace Obalim. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work with TPO Uganda as the mental health and psychosocial support advisor. I'm also a practicing mental health expert and an advocate on mental health. Isabella, it's really very sad that we are opening this morning, and we are looking at an experience that almost all of us Ugandans, including our neighboring countries, felt last week on the 16th of November, when we got the 2 bomb blasts. It's I wouldn't want to say it was shocking, given the past weeks we had 1 or 2 or 3 bomb scares. The first bomb blast that took place at Mamamboga, and then a number of bomb scares that came in. However, the 16th of November seems to be like a day that marks all the journeys, all the steps that of the scares that this country has felt. So I would like to start by sending my deepest condolence to the family, to the Ugandans who lost their loved ones from that bomb blast, and also say that we continue to pray for complete quick recovery for those who are nursing and recovering from whatever kind of impact that the bomb blast, they got from the bomb blast. You talked about a very important thing that we are focusing at trauma. And you asked me to give a perspective on it now. What is trauma? I want to define it in the most simple way possible. Trauma is any threatening experience that a person feels, either directly or indirectly. And this threatening experience can be emotional, can be physical towards a person. You can either be involved on it or you watch it, so direct or indirect life-threatening experience that a person goes through. Now, in this case today, we want to focus at the psychological trauma that comes as a result of a life-threatening event happening. Isabella, you will agree with me that the bomb blast last week was a life-threatening event to every Ugandan. I was in Arua on a duty, but the calls I received, people were asking me, mark yourself safe. I got friends from Kenya, from Rwanda, people from the US were calling me, Grace, mark yourself safe, you work within town. Now, that is clearly a life-threatening event for everybody, either directly or indirectly. Now, the psychological trauma that we want to look at the emotional impact that a person experiences having gone through a life-threatening event that either involved them directly or indirectly. Now, that's what we would like to focus at today. And Isabella, we are very safe to say that given the nature of November 16th, you explained it so well. Last year in November, we had the uprising because of election. A number of people died. There were gunshots everywhere. That already put people in a state of fear. Again, this year in November, we are hearing bomb blasts that has taken life. To us in the field of psychology, we are now safe to term it that Uganda is experiencing what we call complex trauma. Complex, repeated trauma, the same thing happening over time and time. And that could take us to the conversation we were holding yesterday, the normality, the way people have normalized their reaction. Last year, we looked at it as a political event, and they said people moved on. They said, but I'm not in politics, we moved on. But a number of people got affected emotionally. Children equally got affected. And then again this year. So we are safe to say that Uganda is dealing with a state of a complex trauma, and that could sometimes highly explain why we are seeing the normal behavior. Human beings, when you don't accept or you don't recognize what is happening in your environment, you protect yourself. We call it defense mechanism. You protect yourself against any harm. Maybe that could be what our fellow Ugandans are going through. Let me stop here, Isabella, as I give it back to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm saying maybe thank you very much, Grace. I'll bring in Barbara at this point, because also when we're having a pre-conversation to this discussion, I think Barbara was one of the people who was most shocked at the fact that just a few meters away from the bomb blast, business was going on as usual. And so business going on as usual could point to a couple of factors. The first one is the advanced trauma that Grace talked about. But the second one could be the systems that recognize and support citizens within the context of trauma being absent, to the point that citizens don't even recognize that if something like this happens, there should be a way that it's dealt with. And so bringing in Barbara, do you think that the systems, in the systems within the country, or even the systems within Kampala, recognize, hey, she has gone off. So I'll bring Juliet in But do you think the systems recognize the gravity of trauma, and do you think the systems are ready to even provide the service that is needed to address that gravity? And are those services even available, given that people just moved on? Juliet, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Thanks, Grace, for that very elaborative definition of trauma. I'll start from where Grace left before I come to your question. And she talked about, as a country, we've normalized the situation, the trauma. And I want to actually take it back to the history of the country. And there's history of war. At some point, when the governments were being changed from one person to the other. So you realize our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers already experienced trauma, and some of us, our parents, already experienced trauma at some point in their life. And we as young children growing up, according to how our parents behaved when they were going through that trauma at that time, we also got to be traumatized as children, and also got defense mechanism on how to deal with trauma as children. And those are what we call adverse childhood experiences. So we've also grown up with trauma as children, though we may not recognize it, but the way our parents reacted to the trauma in 1960s, 1970s, impacted on how we respond to certain events in our lives. And that explains why it's normal. Like we move on, we get up and we move on. We don't even talk about it. It's a subject we don't even want to go into. I mean, we've gone through worst experiences in our minds. So This was just a one-day event, and we have to move on. We have to get up and go on with our lives. But just like Grace says, it's a defense mechanism, but it's not a healthy defense mechanism, because you numb the feelings, you don't talk about it. But deep down, as you're walking in downtown, you're scared. Deep down, you are scared. You're looking over your shoulder. You're not sure when you're near crowds. So it's not a very healthy way to deal with trauma. The best way is to talk about it. Now, coming to your question about the system, and are there the right systems put in place for us to deal with such events? I think as a country, we are not ready. And the fact that we've actually normalized it means we don't put in place systems like there's educating the masses on some of these things, telling them how should you react when such an event happens, what should you do, the psychology of terrorists, letting them know what is the psychology of terrorists when they are doing these things, what exactly are they trying to do to us, that we should be aware of it. And when it happens, how should we react to such situations? The response on the ground, if you saw the video, some people are sharing. I was looking on WhatsApp statuses on that day, and you see people are posting videos of people, and that's re-traumatizing. Because if I was not there and then you're just posting a video of someone, and people are talking about, I saw someone without a skull, and so we've not really invested heavily in trauma response as a country. Our frontline workers do not know what to do when they get there. Our media, they failed us big time. When they got there, the way they are reporting, the way they are talking about the events, they end up re-traumatizing those who are already traumatized, or even me who didn't experience the trauma. From what they're saying when they're reporting, I'm shocked. I end up getting traumatized. So I think as a country, we are not ready, and maybe we need to put mechanisms in place to make sure that what happens when a traumatic event happens. And now as a country, we're starting to experience now even terrorism. That is something as Uganda we've not had, unlike our neighbors in Kenya, we've not been having such kind of traumatic experiences. So I believe No, we have not put any mechanisms in place to make sure that the trauma response on the ground and even after is really taken care of well. Thank you, Isabella.
And we will come back to the mechanisms that are needed for trauma response on the ground to be functional. But one of the things that you have talked about is the best way to deal with trauma is to talk about it. Last week is still fresh. Today is actually 7 days since last week happened. And so it's still a fresh situation. I haven't had the courage to go into the city since this happened. I don't even think I have the courage to go into crowded places right now because of what happened. And yet, there are people who are in the city on that day. There are people who have to go to town every day. There are people who work on Parliament Avenue, who work on Buganda Road, people who work in CPS who need to go to town every day. And they are scared. So how do we deal at individual level, in the absence of systems, deal with trauma?
That's for me, Isabella.
Yes, and then we'll go to Grace.
Okay. Yeah. First, you need to just be yourself. Just be yourself. And by being yourself means talk about it, share with someone, talk to someone about what happened. Anyone who cares to listen. And now, in this case, I would want also to challenge us as a country and as families, as people who had people who are directly affected by that terrorist act, that we should be good listeners to these people. We should give them time to talk about what they experienced. We should not just get over it. There are people who died. I mean, why are you making a big deal out of it? Let's be good listeners. Let's allow those people who are there and who experienced it to talk about their experience, how it affected them, and how they are feeling at that particular moment. Let's allow them to go through their journey. And us as individuals who are going through it, let's be ready to talk about it. Let's be ourselves. Just be yourself. Don't fear or feel like you're making a big deal out of it. Talk about it. Number two, be very aware of how you're feeling. Track yourself and where you are every day. Today, I'm feeling this way. Yesterday, I was feeling this way. The other day, this is where you are. So track how you are doing every day. Then watch out for some of the physical symptoms of trauma, because apart from the emotional, you might get stomach upsets due to the anxiety. There could be depression. There's the anger. There's the bargaining. There's I wish I wasn't there at that time. What if I had just picked up the other call and gone and visited that friend who had called me? What if I didn't go to work that day? And I woke up feeling like I didn't want to go to work. I wish I didn't go to work. So you might be going through that process of you're angry. You're like, why isn't the government protecting its citizen? You're bargaining. Probably you lost a friend and you're thinking, if only I could have done this to help that person. So you need to track how you're feeling every day and be aware of your emotional state at any particular time. Also, don't stop yourself from feeling. You'll wake up feeling like you want to cry. You will wake up feeling like there are some who respond by laughing. There are some who respond by sleeping a lot. So it's okay to feel, and it is okay to cry. It is okay to just feel. There's nothing wrong with feeling. Do not numb the feelings that you're feeling at any particular time. Also, you might get nightmares, and the memories might keep coming back, and when you sleep, you're not able to sleep. Very loud sounds make you feel very anxious. When people scream, you also feel anxious. So you need to be aware of that and know what are your triggers. What triggers you? What is it that when you hear, it reminds you of that particular event? So be very be in a state of I'm lacking the word, be in a state where you're very attentive to your own emotions and feelings at any particular time. Yeah, for now, I'll just share that.
Thank you very much, Juliet. And you mentioned something interesting. You mentioned something interesting, that talk about it, be yourself, normalize it. But then also, with the previous conversations we have said, you actually mentioned that there's a way in which we've been socialized to respond to trauma. And one of the ways that I think we have been socialized to respond to trauma is to not talk about it, is to not talk about it. And so I'm going to bring in Grace. And with Grace, we are in a context where we don't talk about our problems. We don't talk about our pains. And it's how we were raised to deal with these things, that we don't talk about them. So how do we, as a support system, that is for people who have people who are directly affected, as a support system, how do you encourage the people who are affected directly to actually talk about it? Because whereas we have different responses, I think some of the responses might worsen the situation, So how do we encourage people to actually talk about it? But also, in encouraging people to talk about it, I have also noticed that at times when you listen and you over listen, you probably get more traumatized than the person whose story you're listening to. And so how do we deal with those two, given the fact that the listener is not necessarily an expert and does not know where to stop, but also does not know when they've also been drawn into this thing and have become victims, like the people that they were listening to? Over to you, Grace.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Isabella. Sometime within the week, I was having conversation with some friends and family members who are experiencing the impact of this bomb blast. And I think I was having a conversation with Juliet sometime last week, and I was telling her, Juliet, this is just so wrong. The way people are normalizing things makes me annoyed. I am actually getting annoyed with how people are normalizing things. The way they're just counting the numbers of death as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we are having a system that comes and says, anyway, out of the 6, 2 or 3 were the suicide bombers, meaning leaving us with only 1 or 2 citizens who died. And I'm like, that is so wrong. And I told her, after I have had conversations with people who have experienced this, my heart is shattered, because people are suffering out there. People are experiencing when I listen to them speak, I feel scared, because it's very difficult, Isabella, to deal with an emotional trauma. You are in a state where you don't know really what to do. Your life has changed in a manner that you didn't ask for it, and you don't know what to do to change it. It's not like you have a headache and you're able to take action or take paracetamol and it heals. But you're constantly hearing voices. You're constantly seeing body parts. You're constantly seeing yourself run away from a colleague who needed help, but you're running for your life. You can't help them, and that self-blame stays there. And I was telling her, Juliet, this is just so wrong. We can do better. And I kept saying we can do better. We really can do better. And now that takes me to your question, her support system, what can we do? 1, let us try to practice what we call empathy. Empathy is, doing what you want to be done for yourself for another person. Looking at that person and asking yourself, if I was that person at Jubilee Insurance Building, if I was that person at Parliamentary Avenue, or if I was that sister, because my sister called me that afternoon and told me and said, Grace, I need to speak to you. I need to do a call conference with my friend. I'm like, okay. My sister is never on a hurry, but she had this urgency in her voice. And she told me and said, Grace, My friend ran from Wandegea to town and went and found her sister. The legs are shattered, and she was there trying to pull herself, crying, and nobody was there helping her. She carried her sister on a boda boda and ran with her to Mulago. As I speak to you, they're working on her sister, but she's in Mulago. She's just laughing as I spoke to her. So I want to put her on a call conference with you so that you speak with her. I told her, Sophie, call conference will not help your sister, but I'm giving you a number of a person. Call her. She will come direct to Mulago and she will speak to your friend. Because at that time, Isabella, that person needs a physical touch. That person needs someone on their face to look at them and reassure them and say it will be okay. So practice empathy. Try to put yourself in the place of those people that either have had loved ones or those who are in hospital and see what would you want to be done to you if you're in that place. Because when we do that, we'll be able to listen better, like Juliet said, listen without judging, and then also listen without personalizing the issues. Now, that's the second thing I want to go to. When you choose to listen to a person who has experienced psychological trauma, don't personalize the issues. Listen to them with the intent of supporting them, not listen to them with the intent of feeling like, I can do something, I need to do something, this could have been me, this, I would have done this, maybe I have this capability, I should call someone. No, don't personalize it, because the moment you personalize it, it will get onto you. And Isabella, I want to challenge anybody in this country to come and tell me if they've never experienced any form of trauma. All of us have experienced form of trauma in one way or the other. Therefore, when you choose to listen to these people and you personalize it, it will wake up an emotion, an experience, or something that happened to you in the past, and you'll all become patient. Other than personalizing, let us try to show some love and care. Be kind. Isabella, Ugandans in East Africa, we are taken as the loving, welcoming, embracing people. What happened to that culture? You know, when I was reading things on social media, people calling themselves analysts are trying to analyze, right, 2 days, 24 hours after the bomb blast to say that those were not suicide bombers. Maybe those people were even just being directed. They didn't know they were carrying a bomb. If you look from the video, come on, Ugandans, can we try? Let us show some love. Let us be kind. Showing love and being kind will make you be mindful, will make you be intentional about the words of what you're going to say. Showing some love and kindness will stop you from sharing any picture or any video on social media. Showing love and kindness will let you go out there and write and say, I stand with the bomb blast survivors of the 16th November. And I stand against traumatic social media sharing. That is love, other than resharing them. And then fourthly, let us be responsible citizens. Responsible citizen is not only in being patriotic. Responsible citizen means taking care of your neighbor, taking care of your loved ones. The social media, Juliet said it. Social media is the biggest way we can get information. But can we try, as Ugandans, can we try to be more responsible and try to, look at our phone and assess and say, if my child is to watch these body parts that I'm about to share, how is he or she going to react? That is being responsible. We will be protecting so many people from being traumatized. We'll be protecting the people who are suffering from what we call complex trauma. When you see a social media circulation going on about the bomb blast, the information is not clear, the pictures are so worrying and scary, the videos are so bad, the best you can do is delete and keep quiet. Or tell that person and say, please don't share such things, because they're really, they don't portray respect for the people you're sharing their pictures. Some of these people, Isabella, tomorrow will recover and they will become our prime ministers. They will become our presidents. And their body parts are all over social media. They will never recover from such trauma. So being responsible as Ugandans will help us a lot. But even as we do that, you as a person, can you try to clarify the source of information you're receiving? The first information I received when I was in Arua, they told me 28 people died. That was at about 10:45. I'm like, 28? It was that really much? And then immediately I picked my phone and called someone that I knew would give me the right information. I said, I'm out of town. I am safe, but I want to know, what is the impact? How bad is it? And the person told me, for now, I can tell you we are registering about 5 to 6 deaths, but I can't confirm, and a number of severe injuries. And I told him, thank you. Can we be able to clarify the source of our information? Can we give the correct information? Because it really matters a lot. The information you give out there determines how people will pick up or how people will react. And I want to conclude, Isabella, by saying that mostly those of us who directly or indirectly felt the bomb blast and are still experiencing, can you take a personal decision to avoid social media? Avoid news. Avoid knowing more about what has happened. That will protect you. It's what we call self-defense, protecting yourself from harm. Just don't watch news. Just don't check on those WhatsApp messages. Pick phone calls of people who are checking on you and listen to them. And then, like Juliet said, recognize the changes that occurred in your life. This is something you didn't prepare for. You woke up, went to work, and boom, it happened. I was speaking to a friend yesterday. He works at IGG. And he was telling me, Grace, I went to office last week. The so-called bomb crew that were on the ground didn't even clean up anything. The broken glasses, everything was just still there. People were walking on it. And I was walking and I was like, what is this that is happening? And he's like, I'm not sure. I want to take an early leave. And I'm like, but they just denied your leave. He said, but no, if they don't give it to me, I will just walk away. I don't think I can sit here. I don't like what I'm feeling. His word that he said, I don't like what I'm feeling is what I want to centralize on. Let us recognize the changes. If you're out there and you're not sleeping, you're hearing the voices, you're having all these fears, you're getting reaction in your stomach, like you want to throw up when you're walking out of your house. Those are the changes we are talking about. Recognize it. Just accept at this time that something has changed. Recognize it and let's work with what has changed. And then you'll get back to your normal life. And then finally, let us try as much as possible, Isabella, to maintain our daily routines. It helps a lot in helping us start up the process of healing and moving on. If you can't get out, don't get out, but maintain the daily routine at home. Eat well, try to talk to people in the house, sleep well, do your cleaning, shower, you take 3 baths like you used to do, maintain at least some little bit of normal daily routine. That will help you. Thank you so much, Isabella. Back to you, please.
Thank you very much, Grace, for that elaborate response. And earlier on in the show, we talked about whether the systems were protective enough. And now you talk about your friend who went back to work. I'm going to bring in Barbara. You're the vice chair of the Uganda Counseling Association. Do employers understand the gravity of what happened? Have you received what is it called? Have you received employers asking you to come in and help them deal with this situation? Is the Counseling Association reaching out to human resource managers, but also employers in these places to ensure that their staff are well taken care of? Because now we have a situation where one person has been denied leave, and yet under normal circumstances, you would think that the office would temporarily close until people were in their right frame of mind or a certain level of normalcy had been established back in the space that they worked in. So again, when it comes back to employers, are employers understanding the right to health in as far as it extends to their staff. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Isabella, and good morning, everyone. Sorry, I've had trouble joining in. Do the employers understand the impact? I don't think so. Just like Grace was saying, there is a lot of normalizing trauma that has happened over the time. And since you're woken up and you're alive and you're able to come to office, that means you're okay. Yet necessarily, it doesn't mean I am fine in a state of mind that I can actually go on with my daily business or sit on my desk and perform as expected. We have not received calls as yet from the employers that we think should be seeking out for these counseling services. However, we have offered ourselves as a support system for people who would want to engage in psychotherapy, especially those that have lost dear ones or are now going to have a new life experiencing the traumatic events that happened to them, those that have lost limbs, those that watched people burn. We have a team set and ready. We're going to Mulago, where the victims were, but we had been stopped and told to hold on until. But as the news is coming out, we heard that, the numbers have reduced and people have been discharged. And then we're prompting them to make sure that people are not discharged back to the community when they are not yet stable. They have not yet received the help that they need. They haven't received the counsel that they need. They have not been well taken care of to know what impact has this been to their life and how are they going to live thereafter. So yes, the Counseling Association is ready and available to offer this help. However, we have not yet got the invite to do it. But it's also very important, Isabella, to know that trauma is different. I heard Grace speak on how it's happening. And I remember as a frontliner with COVID-19, going through the hospitals and being at the front line, you're helping people cope with the trauma, but you're also experiencing the daily trauma because I was losing friends and relatives and that. Some of the things that I did that helped me is I stopped following up on the updates because I was in the middle of the updates. So I never used to watch the news or know how new infections and all that. No, I just kept doing my work and I was able to pull through. So I think that is the challenge now. For Ugandans, naturally, I would say it's sad that we have a rare level of resilience, either because we have gone through multiple traumas and they have become part of our normal life, or it's in our upbringing, like you were saying, that, you don't sit and whine and drill over what has happened. You need to move on. And there is a lot of normalizing that is not actually real. So we need to be able to address these issues and actually allow people to know that whatever they are going through, the shakes, the scene refreshes and everything, it is not normal. It needs to be addressed. And that could be government initiated. We are initiating it ourselves, but also the employers should be in position to initiate it. Over to you, Isabella.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And you see, I am fascinated, and I don't understand. I probably don't understand the scope of counseling and psycho support. But wouldn't it, under normal circumstances, be a complementary to what we consider the normal medical route? Like I don't understand why an entire national referral hospital would deny patients who have definitely been traumatized access to specialized support that you are offering. Because I also know that if you don't deal with trauma, it has the potential to upset your balance of life. Okay, and so if and maybe this is me just thinking out loud, that what was so serious that you couldn't see these patients, but also now that they've been discharged, does the hospital have a follow-up mechanism to ensure that this support still reaches them? Because again, in my opinion, I remember that the first time that I had a combat, that the first time that I sought psychological support, it was on referral from my physician. And he sat me down and he told me, you see, the way you come here to make sure that your entire body is fine is the same way you should normalize finding out and making sure that your head is fine. So I really don't understand the psychology of the hospital that denied you access to patients. And I hope that this is a matter that can be pursued and the patients can still be able to get um to get support even if they have been discharged.
I think I want to say that like it was stated, this was a space for national security, and it had to go through phases for us to be able to talk to these people and even address them. So yes, we had to follow protocol, and that is how protocol was. So we couldn't just go in like we did for COVID and offer the support that is needed, because it was an area of national importance. However, I am not sure. I am yet to find out if the hospital has records for the people that were discharged, and if we are allowed to follow up on them. What did they see? How did this affect them? Because now everyone is trying to analyze and investigate. So yes, there could be people who are portrayed as counselors trying to talk to these people, but probably wanting to get other information. And yeah, the government has its way of doing things, and we had to respect that. However, if people are watching the show or following us and knowing what is happening, they should be free to call in for support, to speak to a professional, and they will get the help that they need. But I think it's also very important for the government to realize that when such things have happened, that people need to be resensitized and need to be reassured. It's not, I beg to, and I say this with all respect, I think it's just not enough for the president to come and address the nation and assure us of our safety. But it's also very important that we know that we are safe, because we are talking to people who are experts in this field, who are able to take care of our emotions, our fears, our anxieties, and then be able to normalize back into the system. I heard Isabella saying you've not even gone to town since the blast. I have been to town. I will be in town this evening. But it also depends on, probably I can handle that and you cannot handle that. So I shouldn't be in a position to judge you and think, oh, you're weak, this is light. No, everyone experiences things differently and everyone heals differently. So we can't have a group healing or a group experience. It can be different, because for trauma, it is individuals. Yes.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And I'm going to bring in Grace, because I know that from the last conversation we had with Grace mentioned that she sits on, I think, a government steering committee of sorts that brings on board stakeholders. My question to you, Grace, is, at that level, shouldn't there be certain standard guidelines or protocols that guide trauma responses at national level? So, for example, if you have maybe floods, or you have a pandemic, or you have a terrorist attack, shouldn't those protocols sort of include trauma response? Because it's sad. Okay, I knew that we had a system issue that Juliet pointed out at the beginning of the show. But from what Barbara is saying, it seems to suggest that we do not have trauma protocols to guide work at that level, because it's unfortunate that a statement like this was that government protocol had to happen. It's like saying that we couldn't treat you as doctors because of government protocol, or we couldn't give you access to food because of government protocol. As in, we're talking about the right to life, you know. So as someone who sits on that committee, are these things that you have discussed, and are there guidelines on how victims can be able to still get the much needed support that they need, even if we have a threat of government, you know, to look at? Over to you, Grace.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Isabella. You know, when Barbara was explaining, I was laughing. I think you could see that I was laughing. I was laughing not because like what she's saying was funny, but I was laughing out of pain, and I'm like, this system never changes. Isabella, it took us a lot of push and pull to even be able to be involved to be part of the COVID response and prevention as a psychosocial team, as a psychosocial unit. So it again repeats itself when the country gets such a traumatic experience and a bomb blast, and the bureaucracies and processes. And with all due respect, honestly, Isabella, I just say that this government set up bureaucracy and processes, they just don't make sense to me, a layman person as Grace. They totally don't make sense. And they will definitely never make sense to me when it comes to life-saving situation, when it comes to a scenario where people's lives are involved really. A person has already been at risk. They are already at the verge of fighting for their life. And you bring in your system, you bring in your bureaucracy. I was so pissed with the COVID response and prevention. It took almost a year before they can normalize it and allow the mental health people, the psychosocial aspect, to be part of it. They would put you at the bench back when they've done everything, and then they bring you on board. And then again, it's happening. It just doesn't make sense to me. And with all due respect, really, they just need to look into something somewhere. But back to what you answered. Yes, Isabella, we have a coordination body of all the stakeholders that provide mental health services in Uganda. And that is called the Uganda National Mental Health and Psychosocial Working Group, where I am the chairperson. I chair that coordination group that brings about a full membership of about 34 and email list of about 74. Different stakeholders from institution of learning, CSOs, private government who do mental health and psychosocial support in this country. And I like the question that you've asked. Are there no protocols of responding to such trauma response? Now, this national working group, we are directly supervised by Ministry of Health, Division of Mental Health. We are a private coordination working group that we decided to come up as NGOs, as CSOs and private practitioners to come together and say, let us set up a coordination body that can work towards ensuring that mental health and psychosocial support services in this country is provided in a manner that is respectful, with dignity, and there is standards in process and procedures. Now, that's how far we go. All our mandate is regulated by Ministry of Health, Division of Mental Health. And when it comes to such a national happening, the best that the partners are doing is by holding webinars and debrief sessions for the different individuals. Unless we get clearance or we get acceptance through the Ministry of Health, Division of Mental Health, to come in as a national working group and support in such a national occurrence. Sadly, Isabella, we don't have mandate. And that's where the sad part is. And that is why we are having this conversation. When I reached out to them and I told him, look here, I am the chairperson of the National Working Group for Mental Health, and this has happened. I need you to use your space to let us provide debrief to this country. I have done the same to NBS, I've done the same to NTV, I'm still waiting. At least NBS has given me a positive response within this week. The working group might be on their show. But that is the best we can do. But to come in and be part of such a national response, we really need clearance. We really need approval from Ministry of Health, Division of Mental Health. And to tell you the truth, this approval will come in mid-December or even next year in January. That's why they will come and start asking us, can you do this? Now, your question that you asked send me back thinking. When Juliet talked about trauma response, you know, trauma response comes with clearly stimulated process and procedures. And I want to believe in my head that they're called what? The bomb crew, the terror crew that are under our security system, they should really have this aspect of trauma response as part of their training, as part of their team, because they are the first respondents on the ground to support these people. And why I'm saying you've made me think is that you've given me a challenge. I think we need to take it upon ourselves as private sectors to reach out to these institutions, be in their face and let them know that we are here. Because in my organization where I work from, as TPO Uganda, we have a standard protocol for trauma response. When something happened, what do? You carry out psychological debrief, allow people to express, and ascertain the risk, ensure that you minimize any further risk that might be coming. Involve the other stakeholders that are responsible for the recovery or the well-being of the people that are involved in the trauma. That is some of the basic standard that needs to be followed. But your question has given me a challenge. As much as our hands are tied and we need clarification and approval from the government, Isabella, we can reach out to these institutions. We can reach out to these institutions and ask them if they don't have the expertise, if they don't have the mandate. I am pledging on here that with the national working group, we are open to build capacity of any institution on trauma response, on setting up protocols for responding to trauma, on how to understand mental health and psychosocial support, because it's very, very important. But yes, it still takes that back to protocol, like my colleague Barbara said, that we are still, I reached out to Ministry of Health, one of the officers there. I told him, I said, hey, look, this has happened. What are we planning to do? He said, well, you see, I will communicate to you. And we are still waiting. But we have partners who are out there doing psychological debriefs, who are holding on talk shows, who are holding on webinars, and they're trying to encourage people, trying to normalize life. They're trying to support people to recover and cope with what is going through. But it's important that as a country, we need to have this involved in our system. We need to have this included so that it's taken care of. Thank you very much, Isabella. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Grace. And again, I think the system conversation is the most depressing through this hour. And I'm going to bring in Juliet, and then we will close. And the question I have is really around, so we talked about if the systems are able to provide this support to people. Are the formalized institutions recognizing trauma? And in recognition of trauma, are they seeking support? And it's sad that for all those two questions, it's been a no. And then we went to community, and is community able to recognize trauma and support each other? Again, it was a no. And then I'm bringing this conversation back to system stroke institution, which is really the institution of the armed forces. And I don't know whether Juliet is the right person to answer this question, or it's you, Grace. But I'll start with Juliet. And it's really to say that one of the conversations I continuously have is if there's a worthwhile investment into mental health structures within the security forces. Why? Because they are the first respondents usually. And so there is a layer of trauma of persons who are affected, a layer of trauma of persons who observed, and then there's that layer of trauma of the people who are actually responding and continue to respond to the situation today. one of the trending videos on social media is the one of the police officer who said, "But haven't you seen the bomb went off?" Like, and I was like, okay. Eh? And then there are those who are on the pickup when it went off. And then there are those who are still reporting to CPS to work every day, even if the bomb went off outside their facility. Now, none of us works in security, so we probably do not know the extent of investment in there. But is there an opportunity? Because again, I also worry, given some of the erratic behavior of people in the armed forces, be it security guards, police officers, army men, given that erratic behavior, is it safe to assume that the system inadequacies at national level could very well be mirrored in the institutional inadequacies? And if so, are the services that are the conversations we are having here extended, for example, to key institutions like the police and the army? Yes, over to you, Juliet.
Thank you so much, Isabella. I'll answer part of it, and then I think the other part, Grace, will come in. And I'll first start by, again, Grace talked about being angry. And I'm also very angry about the state of mental health in the country and how it's the most underrated health sector. I don't even know what's the budget allocation for mental health. And yet everything starts and stops here. People go to hospital, they are feeling sick. The doctor will do all the tests, tell you, go home, you're fatigued. That's all to do with the mind. You've had people in hospital who were in a coma or probably were very sick. And then when they're coming out, they tell you, I had to tell my body to fight. And they had to talk to their body to tell it to fight. It's all the mind. But the way we look at mental health in the country, it's just one of those, it's just Butabika somewhere there in the corner, and that's all we know about mental health. We don't know anything else beyond Butabika. And also Butabika is another Pandora we don't want to open. It's something we don't even want to go there. We don't even want to talk about that, such a place that exists in the country. And it is very unfortunate because I work in the hospitals and I look at the offices given to psychologists and mental health. It's just like a corner office somewhere near the store where, if they recommend you, you can walk in there. Well, these other doctors have very big offices, very nice offices, because there's so much importance which is placed to what they do. So when you talk about mental health, even in the armed forces or in these other institutions, first of all, as a country, we've not really invested in mental health. And there's something I tell people nowadays, the effects of COVID-19 will start being felt 5 years from now. Right now, we are all okay. We are normal. We are moving around. But 5 years from now is when we will have another pandemic, and it's going to be the mental health pandemic. People have gone through grief the entire time of COVID-19. You're on lockdown. You're not able to mourn your person. You're not able to offer support to someone who is grieving. People are dying left, right, center. You have children. You have to explain to them what is happening. We are all confined in one place. Now, just before we've recovered from that, there is terrorism, which is now happening in the country. And we have to be resilient because, COVID was worse than this. We had a whole 2 years where we went through COVID and we went through it and we are okay. What is terrorism? So we are going to be fine. And it's being normalized, and no one is coming to say, you know what, calling all the stakeholders in mental health and saying, you know what, guys, let's sit down and see how can we support the country with the mental health. We have the pandemic, we're having terrorism, and then that's where the protocols now come in. what can we, calling all the stakeholders on board and saying, can we come up with something which is going to advise on how people respond when Red Cross gets there, when the media people get there, when the bomb experts get there, what happens when the police are there, the people who are there when that thing happens, what should happen? Are there protocols that we can come up with that guide the entire country on how we should respond when some of this happens, when some of these things happen? And I like Grace because Grace is one person who, she just doesn't sit and watch things happen. She already made a call to the ministry and it's like, what are we going to do? And you see, she's being filled because we shall call you. So when shall they call? When another one happens and again we are scattered, an emergency, and it's okay, Grace, you remember that phone call 5 months ago? Now come, we sit down. It's a letdown. And so I think as mental health practitioners, we are trying our level best. Uganda Counseling Association, they were there in Mulago to offer the help, like going there and saying, we are here, we want to help. And then they are told, this is security, whatever things they said. It's letting us down because we are trying our level best to reach out as mental health practitioners. But it's just that mental health is not a priority in the country. We are okay. Yeah, we are okay. Let's take care. Let's bandage the wounds and the doctors do all this. The mental health, talk to yourself. You will feel okay and get a grip of yourself and get up and walk. But there are some employers who have really tried to support their employees. As Africa Retreat Center, we are working with a number of employers who have reached out to us to work with their employees and to help support the employees, and I would like to commend them. It's just that I can't mention here because of confidentiality, but I know of some employers who are doing something to support their employees. So I'll ask Grace to talk about the national security and mental health around that area.
Very briefly, Grace, because we are out of time.
Okay. So, like Isabella clearly said, none of us work with the security. But just shortly, Isabella, as people who are not in the security system, as a country, as civilians, like we say it, we don't have a structured, clear mental health system. So we really can't start assessing what the military has. These are people that their work is to protect and defend, really. So I about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was on behind the headline on UBC, and I saw General Felix Kolaije was speaking, and they were talking about the mental health system in the country, and the moderator put it in his face and tried to find out what they understand by mental health in the military. I don't know if you listen to his conversation and respond, Isabella, but that gives you an answer, because he said it's not there. These people shoot when they're drunk. They attack people only when they're drunk. And to him, drugs and substance use was not a mental health issue. But to me, Barbara and Juliet, we know that everybody uses substance. Yes, they cope with it. So I want to say that let us set up our house clearly, because as civilians and people who are not in uniform, government system, we can be able to structure. There is a structure, Isabella, there is. The unfortunate bit is that the structure functions in closets. It functions in our office drawers and in our office wardrobes. That is the truth, because we have a clear structure at national level, we have at regional level, we have at district. Isabella, you cannot believe the mental health response system of Uganda goes as low as Health Center 4 and 3. That is the structure this country has. But unfortunately, it's in books. It's put in our shelves in office. It's not practical. So I want to say that as much as we are having all these issues, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I want to really applaud Uganda Police Forces, because I have been doing quite a lot of mental health training with the Uganda Police Forces under the CID division in Chibuli. They are trying to introduce the aspect of mental health assessment and understanding and support to SGBV survivors that comes to the system. So that is a start. We need to give credit where it's due. They're doing something. They just need to broaden it now, and then let also the other military system borrow from there and support. And with the other system, what we can all say, Isabella, let us extend and work in our house and set it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Grace. And Barbara, you have your hand up, and then we should close.
I had my hand up because I heard what Juliet was saying and what Grace is saying. We just to throw more light, we have the structure in place, but we don't have the implementers. The government has not come out to recognize counseling and clinical psychologists and counseling psychologists as public servants, people that should be down to the public giving this service. Because if the government had come up with a scheme of service for these professionals to be there, then probably UCA wouldn't be going to Mulago, because Mulago will be fully facilitated with a psychologist, with a clinical and a counseling, working together. So what we need at the end of the day, it's not just to have a system structure, but to actually have the system fully facilitated with the people, the staff that can do this work, so that like the saying says, Omuntu wa bulijjo gets all the help that they need, right from the grassroots and up to the corporate and all those that can even afford to pay for the services. So it is just not enough for us to say we are going to handle when we don't even know how to handle. Because even when you go for partnership, all the discussions, yes, we have government representative, but the ball is usually thrown back to us as private practitioners, as donor-funded organizations, as implementers. So what do you want us to do, or how can we help? But if the government comes and takes it on as its baby and says, these are my people, these are our people, and this is how we're going to manage the mental health. We need these people, we are going to fund it like this and get it going. I think we'll be in better places than we are right now. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And the ladies, that is Juliet, Grace, and Barbara, thank you for spending today with us and walking us through trauma, walking us through realities that we have probably not considered as abnormal, and simply because we've been socialized that way. And for those that are watching, I hope that you've learned a lot. There is a lot of support from the Uganda Counseling Association. And so if you need help, do not hesitate to reach out. You could inbox us, direct message us on Twitter, or in case you have any of our contacts, please get in touch. I know that the last time Grace was on the call, she shared with us a list of service providers. And so if you need help, do not hesitate to reach out, because it's important that with as much effort as we take in healing our bodies and treating malaria and treating typhoid and treating, that is the same energy we should use to guard and protect our mental health. Mental health is as important or even more important than the physical health. It's important. It's impossible to be in good physical health if your head is not in the right place. And so I hope that today we shall all commit to ensuring that our heads are in the right places, but also supporting the ones around us who need this much needed support. Otherwise, have yourselves a lovely day, and I will see you next week. Thank you.